Eskom has been on the verge of collapse for many years. Load shedding has returned and South Africans are fed up. Government admits there is a problem but say they have a solution.
So Eskom is currently facing massive problems of a structural nature, operational nature and financial nature. 𝗵𝗶𝘀 and 𝗀𝗁cie were badly designed and badly constructed and are not performing at optimum levels.
A rescue plan had to be put in place.
Eskom will need to develop a new business model. We shall immediately embark on a process of establishing 3 separate entities: generation, transmission and distribution under Eskom Holdings.
Chairman of the South African Renewable Energy Council, Sankaree-Govender, says it's easier said than done.
There's going to be a massive cost, and I think there's going to be a massive time frame as well involved. This is not an overnight task. Eskom is a massive company. It's got almost 50,000 people. You're going to have to figure out who goes to which business unit. You're going to have to figure out what's the new mandate of the business and how is that business unit going to function.
As expected, Eskom was high up on the agenda during the budget speech. Minister 𝗵𝗶𝘀 made it very clear the power utility had to shape up.
We are setting aside 23 billion rand a year to financially support Eskom during its reconfiguration. I want to make it clear the national government is not taking on Eskom's debt. Financial support will be based on the strategic need, but also on whether we can afford it.
The minister was clear that Eskom had to manage their own debt burden of over 420 billion rands.
Were you surprised about the bailout?
Absolutely not. Eskom's too big a company to fail, number one. And the problems that we all hear about that Eskom is facing cannot be solved in an extremely short period of time. And Eskom's debt and the interest incurred on the debt is just too high. You know, Eskom fails and then we as a country fail.
But is that not part of the problem? The fact that Eskom always knew that when they ran into trouble, they could call a friend.
I think why we kind of like this whole remodeling, unbundling of Eskom, it's very important because you've got to cut that lifeline out.
Unions have already made their opposition to the move known and recently met with the president.
We had a meeting with the president together with the cluster of ministers or interministerial team that was set it up to look to the issues of Eskom. We were then told what we know, mainly in terms of the problem that Eskom is facing in dealing with those issues. Our issue was to hear the reason and the thinking behind the unbundling, because there are a number of problems in Eskom. Whether you unbundle it or not, they will still remain in terms of those things. For example, the issues of looting and corruption is going to be there whether we unbundle it or not. So we're not convinced as 𝗀𝗃𝗃 that the unbundling is a solution.
What it will allow them to do is manage their own budget, because the profitable units will expand and the less profitable units will have to look at new innovative ways of keeping the business going. So generation has the biggest debt. The one issue with the unbundling or the remodeling of Eskom is who's going to take on the debt? Do you give that to generation, or do you split that amongst the transmission and the distribution? We've spent too much money on 𝗵𝗶𝘀 and 𝗀𝗁cie to allow it as a country to fail. And come back to the remodeling of Eskom, you know, generation could potentially be split even further if it becomes a business unit on its own. So it's not an easy solution. It's going to, you know, take a few years before we get it right.
Eskom is technically insolvent and struggling to keep the lights on. The president says he has a plan to save it, but there's no quick fix.
Days after President Ramaphosa's announcement, the power utility plunged the country into darkness, claiming that aging infrastructure malfunctioned. But immediately, theories of sabotage surfaced, strongly denied by COSATU's Secretary General 𝗀𝗃𝗃𝗍𝗃.
We dismiss this thing, not on the basis that it may not be true, on the basis that there's no evidence supporting those particular issues.
But evidence of rampant corruption and mismanagement has been in the public domain for many years. For the first time in 2008, the South African public knew there was a problem when the lights went out and load shedding became a new catchphrase. The result has been devastating to the country's economy and its people.
The first impact that we saw was after 2008, where we lost, we estimate, almost 280 billion over that period of potential. If you calculate over years, we lost quite a lot of value, jobs, new investment. So there's been really a huge knock on South Africa's gross capital formation, because a lot of the machinery and investment are driven by energy demands and energy needs, and we couldn't meet that demand.
𝗀𝗁cie Mondi is a senior lecturer at the Wits School of Economics and Business Sciences.
But also the number of small micro enterprises that went out of business, particularly in the rural towns of South Africa, must be in their thousands. But we do know is that the unemployment levels and the inequality and poverty has been worsened by part of the weakness in that capability, because Eskom is a huge input in business.
But Eskom struggled to sustain operational stability. Most of the generation fleet is more than 37 years old. Years of alleged mismanagement, alleged corruption, lack of leadership has driven the power utility to the brink of collapse. 𝗵𝗶𝘀 and 𝗀𝗂𝗃 were built to ensure the country's energy future by adding extra capacity to the grid. The then Minister of Public Enterprises, 𝗀𝗁cie𝗿𝗆𝗍, was adamant that the project would stay on track.
I will not tolerate any delays to the delivery of this unit. Should any delays be experienced, heads will roll.
But 6 years later, the plants are still not running at full capacity. The cost has escalated to over 300 billion rands. 𝗵𝗶𝘀 from 24.9 billion to 145 billion. And 𝗀𝗁cie from 80.7 billion to 161.4 billion. This is all a result of bad design and lack of expertise. COSATU is saying, bring back the skills.
We've been told that engineers, people who knows the work in Eskom, have been patched in dealing with those things. I said, bring them back, because you know who they were, bring them back. Those who have no skills, those who don't have the engineering capacity, can't be leading Eskom.
But Eskom's not the only one to blame. Municipalities owe more than 17 billion rands, and it's time communities pay up.
And the communities have some roles to play in dealing with those issues. We think it's a role of the trade unions, the communities, and the church to say to people, we must pay for the electricity that we used.
Mondi says government is also to blame.
A lot of the problems really are as a result, as I've argued, of ANC macroeconomic management, which has come back to haunt the country, and is reflected by Eskom, as you see what is happening today. It is a macroeconomic policy program of a failing state that is caught up in its own interest.